Hello, welcome again to Sports Unlocked with Martyn Ziegler from the Times, Tariq Panja from the New York Times, myself, Rob Harris from Sky News. Lots to get into this week. Big news from the IOC and where they're heading in terms of transgender eligibility. We've been in and around UEFA at the Euro 28 launch in London, but more chaos in Turkey. Turkish football seems to be in a state of absolute turmoil.
We talked about this a few weeks ago, that story about the Turkish betting scandal, and more details now. 102 players suspended, 25 in the top tier, hundreds more, really, across the Turkish football spectrum. We talked about it when it involved referees, but this is widening. A Premier League club president has also been dragged into this. This is a big story, isn't it?
Premier League club president.
Super League club president.
Phew. No, it is a big story. I mean, it was big when all those referees were basically implicated in this, and now it's got even bigger with all these players. So
the third and fourth tiers are off. They are going to continue the top two divisions. Obviously, we're in the men's international break at the moment, but they've even asked FIFA to open a new transfer window because they need to fill some of the squads with players, potentially, given how many have been suspended and squads have now got their shortages. It also impacted the Turkey national team for World Cup qualifiers.
El Mali plays for Galatasaray, withdrawn from the Turkish squad for this round of international matches. He's been given a 45-day ban. A teammate of his at Galatasaray, a chap called Metan Beltaci, got a much longer ban, 9 months for him. But guys, this is such a weird story. So many players, over 1,000 across all of these divisions, suspended. As Rob said, those third and fourth divisions, which I think are semi-professional, they've almost had to shut down. One of the weird quirks of this is the only way you can watch, I think the third division is Turkey. The rights, the TV rights, are owned by a betting company. So you have to register with a betting company to watch that league. So I wonder if the players... Yeah. And another weird part of this is, like, when you register, you don't actually have to put your money in. You get a very cheap free bet without giving your credit card details or anything else. So I don't know how much any of these guys or how many bets a lot of these people have been placing. It's such a strange story.
There was an issue in England about 5 years ago about the only way to watch some FA Cup games was on a betting website as well.
Yeah, and it does seem a bit strange when you have this sort of ban on people involved in football, betting on football at all. And I think, in fact, during that season, Rob, there was a Lincoln City player who was actually got a very lengthy ban for spot fixing, basically deliberately getting booked and getting his mates to bet on it, which doesn't sit very comfortably with obviously having a betting company showing all the matches via their website.
And not only is Turkey going to be hosting the Euros in 2032 jointly with Italy, this season they've got the Europa League final in May at Besiktas. So UEFA is due to stage one of its big showpiece matches in the country at the end of the season.
One of the funny things of this very funny story is there hasn't been much comment at all from big football, whether it's UEFA or FIFA, on this. I mean, this, on the face of it, this is one of the biggest scandals in a major league or a major football country, at least. I don't recall big comments at all from any of the football leaders.
This is partly due to the media industry. Doesn't have an English link to it, doesn't have a Premier League link to it, which impacts how stories spread out around the world.
Maybe. But if you're FIFA or UEFA, in this case, of European football's governing body, and of course it's a FIFA member as well, and we've said these numbers, 1,000 players suspended, 21 of them arrested, thousands of bets, allegedly, this guy being withdrawn from his national team and international week. You would have thought it would elicit some degree of comment or censure from the people who run football, but no.
I suppose it's difficult for people to say anything until things are actually confirmed. I mean, there has been a suggestion that maybe this is a bit of quite an over-eager prosecutor, perhaps running away with what's been happening, is it? I mean, I've seen that reported somewhere.
Well, we do wait to get more details on this. For now, the Turkish Federation saying that they need to deal with scandal, decay and corrupt relationships.
I wonder how if you're a federation like that, when you're going to pro sponsors and you're saying, right, we've got to deal with decay and corruption.
I can't find if the Turkish Federation has a betting sponsor, but they certainly announced a few years ago a crypto Bitcoin sponsor.
Well, I would have been prepared to bet large amounts of Bitcoin and lots of other cryptocurrencies that the Turkish Federation would have a crypto sponsor.
Also sponsored the Turkish National Olympic and Paralympic Committees. The IOC and IPC, they don't have any crypto or betting sponsors yet.
It's only a matter of something, not time.
Absolutely.
It's not a matter of anything. I think it's very unlikely. I actually think generally sport is going away from cryptocurrency. I think they've realised NFTs, cryptocurrency are perhaps not all they were cracked up to be.
And the International Olympic Committee and International Paralympic Committee have weightier matters to be dealing with at the moment. Certainly things that are causing all sorts of challenges. And this is the gender eligibility policy. We've talked about it so often on here. Things have really changed in the last year with the Donald Trump influence and the election of Kirsty Coventry, with a bit of influence from Seb Coe's failed IOC campaign as well.
Good story this week, Ziggs. You want to tell us?
Yes, thanks. Jane Thornton is a key person in this. She is the Canadian rower who was appointed as the IOC's Medical and Science Director in January, taking over from Richard Budgett, Dr. Richard Budgett, who's a British guy, had that position for a long time. And actually, Jane Thornton, I think the combination of her taking this position and Kirsty Coventry's election, when she said, we're going to look at the science behind this, commission this scientific review. And then last week, Jane Thornton provided the findings of this science-based review, lots of input from outside people as well, independent experts, scientists, an evidence-based review of all the evidence, and basically delivered to the IOC members that the result of this review was that there are permanent advantages to being born with male chromosomes, and that's whether you've transitioned or I think whether you're a DSD athlete, these permanent physical advantages remain into adulthood, whether you've transitioned or not, or whatever's happened. So I think seeing after they've got that report from her, I think the IOC very much now it's all systems go, and they're going to bring in an official ban on transgender women in female sport as early as February, maybe, probably a bit later, but that's certainly the earliest it could happen.
The IOC's official position is there is no decision yet. That's because it has to go through the formal processes, but it very much seems like it is a done deal. It's the complete direction of travel. There will be a blanket ban on transgender women and DSD athletes from the women's sporting categories. It has to go technically through the executive board still, and then the IOC session. There is an IOC session before the Winter Olympics in Italy at the start of February.
So, has there been any reaction at all? Because as you said rightly, we've been talking about this issue for some time. It has been the direction of travel. And, if you go about years when we talked about this almost feels inevitable that we've got to this point. Kirsty Coventry, as Rob said, made it a big part of her policy, set up a working group on this, and she made a point of protecting the women's category. And it looks like that's going to happen. But has there been any reaction to what has been reported this week, even though the IOC have said there's no decision yet?
I mean, there's been huge amounts of reaction from sort of campaigners, women's groups, women's rights groups, who all say the female competition should be protected. Very little reaction, I haven't seen any, in fact, really, from people who are sort of pro-inclusion and believe that transgender women should be able to take part in female competition or even DSD athletes. Rob, have you picked up much?
Well, I mean, there's the social media reaction and the officials we've been speaking to. On social media, even those who might say have won the argument are still being very critical, because while they are getting this ban on trans women they've been pushing for, they're actually demanding quite forcibly with the language, that the language does change. And the fact they're saying they're not transgender women, they're men. So there is still a language issue, which also overlooks the sensitivities as well. The fact that at the heart of this are athletes, and athletes who will now potentially be excluded.
Yeah, massively does, and that's part of a broader culture war. But from a sports point of view, this is where it's ended up. In terms of what the World Athletics have done with the test, can you give us some explanation about that? Has that kicked off, and is that the type of testing the IOC will probably want the other sports to do?
Well, I did hear that they have been talking to the members about introducing what are generally sex tests. Because as we've seen with World Athletics, with these swab cheat tests that they're doing to check if there is any presence of the Y chromosome, if you're going to compete in the female category, that if you are going to introduce this ban on trans women, that you might need to have some form of testing. But the question is, at what stage? Who pays for it? Is it feasible?
Yeah, so you could either, the World Athletics test that will have to happen once in your career is you'll basically be tested to see if you have XX chromosomes or XY. XY, obviously, that means you have male chromosomes. And you can do this with a cheek swab or a blood test. I think it's pretty cheap. I don't think it's going to be particularly expensive. But I'm sure there will be challenges, legal challenges, potentially if people don't want to do it. But it just seems the way it's happening, doesn't it? And I would imagine, I think the only thing we don't really know with the IOC, well, there's two things. One is, are they going to say as a strict eligibility thing, or are they going to do it as a recommendation for all sports to follow? I think they want to do it as a total eligibility issue. Because at the moment it's just a recommendation that their current policy is transgender women can take part with reduced testosterone. So I think they want that to change. And the other interesting thing is, are they going to just say this is just about elite sport, or will they say this should actually affect all sport? Because that's another big issue with all the campaign groups. Should parkrun, for example, should transgender women who take part in parkrun, purely amateur things as a hobby, should they be allowed to have records and create records in parkrun? It's an amateur thing, or is that unfair on the grassroots competitors?
Well, if we think back to the past, the IOC did have what were known as certificates of femininity. They were introduced at the 1986 Mexico Olympics, but then they were dropped ahead of the Sydney 2000 Games because they were deemed unethical and unscientific, these chromosome-based tests. The argument for World Athletics is that they aren't as intrusive. Now, in terms of official reaction, I have managed to speak to one of the IOC members on the record. That's Andrew Parsons, who's president of the International Paralympic Committee, and they're now weighing up their own decision as well. And what he said is they're going to take the lead from the IOC decision. And you can sense his argument is actually shifting towards emulating the blanket ban as well in some form, because he's saying science should guide this decision. It should not be cultural, religious, or even social elements driving the transgender situation, as he calls it. And he talks about just it becoming increasingly prevalent. So that means there's a need to deal with it now. And while at the Paris Olympics, there were no transgender athletes we know of, the Paralympics did have their first openly transgender athlete, Valentina Petrillo, an Italian sprinter. She didn't win any medals, though.
Yeah, maybe not in Paris for the Olympics, but of course Tokyo, we had Laurel Hubbard and the New Zealand weightlifter in the competition over there, and it kind of was a big story around those games, and there was a lot of toing and froing from campaigners on all sides, and then we had the issue with the boxing competition at the Paris Olympics. And to be honest, for those people who run sports and for the IOC and the IPC, and perhaps for a lot of sports fans as well, this is an issue, a very sensitive issue that has dragged on for so many years without any clarity. It probably is a time where the IOC takes a lead, certainly for these events and maybe for the other sports that are under its umbrella, to have a rule, a consistent rule. And there are going to be people who aren't going to be happy, obviously. And we've said this before, you can't please everyone in this debate, no chance. And then a chance to move forwards from where we've been the last few years.
One thing that I was asked this week is whether this was the IOC responding to Donald Trump, who made a big play of announcing that transgender athletes are going to be banned from taking part in female competition in US sport.
And there'd be maybe funding denied. And on the Olympics and Paralympics, he talks about denying visas to trans women trying to come to the country to compete in female competitions in LA in 2028. And Kirsty Coventry's first press conference after winning the election when we were there in Greece in March, so many questions were about Donald Trump, about the trans ban, about gender eligibility. I asked her in the interview the next day as well. Probably, if this hadn't come in or wasn't being introduced at some point down the line, there could be quite a bit of friction, or there could have been, between the IOC and the White House.
Maybe, but I think she has maybe surprised some people as well, or maybe not herself. She's done what she said so far. She has taken some decisions. She has been
pausing and reflecting.
As she said, she. This is an issue that she said she was going to take on, and until we get more details, we have to say, to be fair to her, it looks like she has been trying to deal with this issue. Whoever's in the White House, it'd be interesting to sort of get more details from her herself as to how this is played out.
Yeah, personally, I don't think that. I think that this would have happened even if Trump hadn't got involved. I mean, I think what happened in Paris with the two DSD boxers, or anyway, suggested to be DSD boxers,
they themselves say they were female at birth and believe themselves to be female athletes.
That's correct. I think it was the International Boxing Association declared that they weren't. I'm sure people at the IOC would be absolutely desperate to avoid that sort of controversy again in LA. So I think whether Trump had done this or not, I think the pressure's been building so much on the IOC. It does feel to me like they sort of dragged their feet on this issue a bit, and not just them, FIFA as well have avoided taking any review or looking at the evidence properly on this, and seem to have been sort of just like putting off a decision on this, probably waiting for the IOC.
FIFA have been conducting a review. It's just been going on for a couple of years without conclusion.
Okay. Interesting to find out more details on that at perhaps the next Gianni Infantino press conference in whenever that is, 2029.
So for the IOC and the IPC, it's on to lots more meetings, lots more presentations and discussions to finalise this process. Regulation does keep everyone very busy in the world of sport. And with that, it's on to the Premier League and preparations for their meeting of clubs, the shareholders' meeting as it's known, which is due to take place next Friday, just at the end of the international break. And here we are again. It's financial regulations and the latest iteration. Will it go through? What is it?
Yeah, and this has been bubbling on for a bit, but I think this is the sort of do or die for the Premier League. I think if they fail to get this through, it's the end.
We don't normally talk in such hyperbolic sound bites to get clipped up. Do you reckon it's going to end up on someone's website?
Well, and it
lesser things have been.
That's true. Yeah, I need to try and sort of a bit more tabloidy language when we record, I think. Yes, but I do think it.
Financial rules.
Yeah, I do think it is actually. So, PSR, the proposal is for PSR to stop, and then you'll have the squad cost ratio to come in, which is similar to what they have in UEFA. You can only spend 85% of your revenue on player costs. And then a second vote will be on anchoring, which is this sort of cap on spending limit that you cannot spend more than 5 times what the bottom club receives in Premier League TV money on player costs. Now, both of those I think are problematic for some clubs. Squad cost ratio, interestingly, although it's sort of widely accepted at UEFA, if you're like a club like Brentford or Bournemouth or Brighton or Crystal Palace, actually people there have told me that they'll have less headroom for spending than they do under PSR. And that means that's going to affect the competitive balance of the Premier League.
What's the difference? Sorry, before you go on, between PSR and squad cost ratio, for people who haven't followed this in the granularity?
Sure.
Some of us have.
Yeah, PSR, you can lose £105 million over 3 years. And so if you have a good year, make a lot of money in the transfer market 1 year, that gives you a lot of headroom to spend. And Brighton have done that. They made profit after profit, and they've done very well, for example. Squad cost ratio is, say your annual revenue is 150 million, you can only spend 85 million on that, on transfers, player wages, and agents' fees. And if you do breach that, then you have to pay a fine, and that fine goes to the other clubs would go to the other clubs in the Premier League. So you'd have a situation potentially, say you're Brentford, you pay a £5 million fine. That goes to all the other clubs who've complied with the rule, including the very rich ones like Manchester City or Manchester United. Which somebody told me, can you think of a more egregious rule? So I think there's a big question mark over whether this vote will actually take place, because clubs who you would think would generally support the Premier League on their proposal here, I think it's a big issue for them.
What's the pressure to bring it now and to risk this division?
Well, it's not just now. They've been trying to do it for the last 2 years, basically. And they've not had a vote before because they've not had the necessary support. They've been, the Premier League executive basically feel they'll probably lose it. So they've agreed to sort of do it in shadow. But I think they probably thought, well, now you've got 10 clubs in Europe. They're all sort of having to undergo this much stricter rule of the same rule, but with 70% of revenue instead of 85%. And that actually, that should be enough to persuade the others. But I'm not sure it will be. I mean, we'll wait and see. And anchoring, this is even more controversial because you've got the PFA threatening legal action, saying it's effectively a salary cap.
This is the players' union not happy that the wages of their members could be constrained by this anchoring system because it would limit the earnings of players.
How is that? How so? How does anchoring work?
So as I said before, this thing about you can only spend 5 times what the bottom club receives in TV money. So say if the bottom club gets 105 million, that means you can only spend 5 times that much. Now you think at the moment that's probably fine, and nobody would have been in breach of that. What the big clubs argue is that actually that stops them being able to potentially compete with Real Madrid, who have very, very high revenues, and it's the sort of thin end of the wedge. The PFA's argument is it just potentially capping player earnings, but this would potentially be a model that could be adopted by the EFL, clubs brought lower down the league, and then you would have a situation there with players in League One, League Two, where their earnings are also being affected.
Imagine if there was more financial restraint in some of those leagues.
My God, they might survive some of these teams. Who would have thought that? If both of these things fail, what is the Premier League left with? Because there's a reason why financial regulations exist, and we've, ad nauseum over the years talked about this. But if these two things don't pass, either one or the other, which, as you said, is very likelihood they won't, what is the Premier League left with?
The Premier League is left with PSR, basically, as the default system.
Which hasn't been controversial at all.
It hasn't been. I think the controversy arose because clubs thought it would never be followed through. The threat of it was never followed through. And I think there had been situations before where clubs had breached it effectively and had been allowed to get away with it. But suddenly, when it decided that wasn't going to happen anymore, then people felt very aggrieved. I think there's probably more of an acceptance now that PSR is okay. I don't think the clubs are particularly anti it.
Unless they get pinged by it, as we've seen.
Yeah, but now they know there's no sort of, you can't say we didn't know we were going to get a points deduction now.
Can I just say, this whole thing though, this is the clubs who decide the rules of the league they play in. You're asking the teams rather than anything outside of football. The members decide how their club runs. and each of them obviously in their own interests. For me, it's not an ideal situation where the people playing the game decide the rules of the game they're playing, and it just causes this mess. And I really wish that there was an independent element of the Premier League or the FA or something. I'm not going to say regulator, Ziggs. I know you're tempted to have a go at me, though. I could see you winding up, but just something that isn't the teams deciding their own rules.
But why shouldn't the teams decide their own rules? It's their competition.
It's a members'
No,
organisation.
it's a competition while they're in the season this year. There'll be 3 new teams next year. It's their competition as well, Ziggs. And in about 3 years' time, there might be a team somewhere else who's got rules imposed of that we're deciding today with the current 20 members. I just think that the rules of football should not be decided by the 20 executives who are in the seat at any one time, because they're not going to be doing it every year, are they?
But you've got enough complaints about some of the executive committees around the world.
Oh, I've got a lot of complaints. No, but it's just one of my bugbears that this group of people at any one time, a snapshot in a moment in time, decide these rules because it suits them. Right at the moment, we've got a lot of American private equity, for example, in the Premier League. So these are going to be rules that these people want. Maybe there's going to be a different group of owners in the future. We will see.
Some columnists might say, let the fans decide. Let them set the rules.
Let them eat cake.
At least one thing they're all settled on in the Premier League is the calendar. Well, apart from when they're complaining about not enough gap between games. But in Major League Soccer, it's all changed. Have they finally seen sense by switching to a July to May season rather than this one they've had for a few years now, which is March to December? They want to align with the rest of the major European leagues.
It probably makes sense. I think they originally did it, thought, oh, well, we won't compete. We don't want to compete with other American sports like NFL, so perhaps we'll have a different calendar. But I think it's more natural for football, and if you're looking at international football competitions as well, it makes sense.
This was the MLS owners who met this week to take the decision. Power given to the owners of the clubs or the franchises.
All power to all owners everywhere. Yeah, this is also, you have the international calendar debate over when the national team windows are as well. It will just be aligned neatly. And Ziggs and Rob, I think now the MLS is several decades old now. It's confident enough to compete with the other US sports. It has its own audience attending the game and watching on television. Maybe there's been an announcement there as well with regards its 10-year, $2.5 billion deal with Apple TV, where since they signed, I think a year or two ago, there was this thing called a season pass. So you have to pay a few quid extra on top of your subscription. Now that has been scrapped. So if you've got Apple TV, I think anywhere in the world, you can watch Major League Soccer, which is great for the visibility of this competition.
Yeah, I mean, clearly it's an admission that the season pass didn't work, did it? Because if you're paying for Apple TV and then you're asked to pay for another charge on top of that to watch MLS, I mean, it's not the most attractive competition in football. I think they were hoping that the Messi factor would help them, but clearly it hasn't.
A league growing didn't need to go behind an extra paywall. The fact is, you've already got a subscription service, Apple TV, and it's not going to necessarily attract the casual view at the moment. So you've really got to put a lot of effort into think, I'm going to get the season pass. Although in the US, some of the stations in each market do put the games on free to air.
Yeah, I completely agree. Kind of boneheaded to disappear behind another layer, as you say, when you're not one of the biggest sports franchises there. Rob, we talked about this maybe as the calendar change, it's being aligned with other competitions around the world. Could it align with the rest of football in another way? There's been talk and rejection for years of promotion and relegation. Is that now a possibility?
Well, they always should have abided by the FIFA statutes. Weren't they giving an exemption when they launched the league after the World Cup in 1994 to give certainty to the investors? They would put money into the competition, so it would be like NFL, NBA, MLB, the fact that you do have these closed leagues, but it's an anomaly. I mean, Australia's league also has it as well, but there's constant pressure to try to introduce it. It would give more of a competitive edge to the league potentially, but what's happening in the lower leagues?
Well, maybe not lower leagues for long, actually. Look, this might be because there's a big challenge coming here. The USL, a sort of rival competition, has been running Division 2 and Division 3 leagues in the US sense. They're kind of lower than the MLS, which was given so-called Division 1 status. But the USL has announced that for the first time, as soon as 2028, it's going to have a Division 1 league to rival MLS. And not only that, it controls 2 leagues below it and has said from 2028, you could have, if MLS doesn't want to do it, there's going to be a rival league system with promotion and relegation with 3 professional divisions, and it will be run by someone who's very familiar to the Premier League and Stoke City fans, Tony Scholes, who was the chief executive at Stoke and had been a director at the Premier League. This feels like, I don't know, if they get this right and the MLS stays exactly the way it is, it could be an interesting rival for fan attention.
So, because there have been so many new franchises in the US, you've had this situation where, out of nowhere, fans have got to start supporting clubs. In England, that largely happened in the sort of 19th century, early 20th century. But are we saying in these markets that if you've been supporting Inter Miami, you're going to suddenly start supporting a new team and you're going to follow that in the rival competition? Or is David Beckham going to move his franchise across to the new system? Are they going to offer some incentives? Because it is getting quite established with New York City FC, LAFC, Inter Miami as well, although we're required to call them David Beckham and Lionel Messi's Inter Miami.
Indeed. I mean, it's pretty unprecedented in football that you'd have 2 competitions within the same country. I know it's a very big country. I can't think of any other sort of similar rivalry like that. I think it would be amazing, and I think it's unsustainable. I think you'd have to have some sort of merger, and maybe that's the idea.
Or some sort of financial rules.
Yeah.
Some anchoring between them.
Yeah, it already functions though. You're looking at the sort of map of the US. These teams in the USL, not this Division 1, it doesn't exist yet, but the kind of lower tier leagues. There's teams in, New Mexico, Colorado Springs, Phoenix, Las Vegas, Sacramento, Tampa, like all across the US. Louisville, where is this? Like all across the state. So it's interesting, and there's a tension, a sporting tension, isn't there, when you have games, something at stake like promotion or relegation that might attract people to attend the games as fans or watch on TV.
I'm sure you could probably imagine a few headlines. We're going to have John Textor's interested in a new team.
Yeah.
Of course it is.
So it's going to launch by 2028. They need sponsors. They need broadcasters, don't they? So then they have to make decisions. If you really want visibility, do you go completely blanket outside of something like an Apple deal?
Well, as I say, I don't see there's the financial muscle or that. I don't think there's the interest in the USA to sustain these 2 things. I mean, if you look at they are, but if you look at there's lots of interest in football in the US, but just not in domestic football. Because if you look at in terms of purely financial terms, what they broadcasters pay for English Premier League TV rights is quite substantially more than they'll pay for American MLS TV rights.
And Champions League rights on CBS as well.
Yeah, so people have said partly that's because the fans in America are aware that the best players are not playing there, or even the best of the next best players are not really in their league. And this has been something that Gianni Infantino has been one of the people, the FIFA president's been talked about this for years. This is a very wealthy country, but it just doesn't invest huge money in its football talent. The franchise fees, for example, of MLS teams have gone through the roof. The kind of buying and selling of football clubs themselves is enormous, but the amount of money they invest in salaries and players is nothing like these teams are worth, which is a very strange anomaly as well. So if these really rich people who live and invest in American sports decided to turn their attention to what's on the field itself, maybe the talent and the quality on the pitch will improve. And the discerning American fan will have something to watch that they say, yeah, we've got some of the best players here. Let's watch this thing.
And it was early this year when Gianni Infantino was being asked about Wrexham's rise through the English leagues with their Hollywood backing that he said this is one of the beauties of promotion and relegation. So in soccer, unlike any other sport, surprises are happening. So he was giving a backing to promotion and relegation, and it prompted the conversation about the USL plans. And Infantino said this is something you can bring into the American culture as well, where you don't have the concept of promotion and relegation. There's something interesting that I think has to be explored.
And also, perfect dynamic pricing for tickets in this new competition, Tariq, which I know you're very keen on dynamic pricing.
My goodness, yes. Dynamic pricing. Where do we begin? Another price hike thanks to the dynamic pricing at the FIFA World Cup. Certainly in the United States, it looks like. Henry Bushnell, who's been working at The Athletic on these stories, has been talking to supporters with access to ticket prices, and they've gone up again.
That's dynamic pricing.
Yeah, but before anything's happening, this is a situation that this competition that obviously is supposed to be open to fans from all over the world. Tickets are in the thousands of dollars to attend these games, particularly the knockout games. We talked about Zoran Mamdani, the incoming New York City mayor, last week, and perhaps a week before that as well, in his crusade about ticket pricing and how it's pricing out fans. And this is FIFA basically, in the week to follow, giving the two fingers up. These prices are really, really, really expensive. And it shows no sign that the regular person will be able to attend these football matches in the ways they could in the past. Like some of these tickets are 5 times more expensive than they were in Qatar, for example.
But we won't be having dynamic ticket pricing at Euro 28 in the UK and Ireland.
No, the UEFA and the English FA have confirmed this, that they will not have that. And Mark Bullingham, the FA chief executive, was very clear that actually the approach is to make it affordable for genuine fans. I think UEFA will probably take the approach to try and squeeze maximum revenue by making hospitality expensive and the premium seats. So, it's sort of tax the rich, effectively.
And we did hear from the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, in Downing Street discussing this when he was hosting at the Zana Sheffer, the UEFA president, and he spoke to the digital media outlet Joe, and he brought up the US World Cup.
Yeah, he said there are lots of concerns around pricing at the World Cup in the US, and they needed to learn lessons from that for the Euro 28.
Closest you get to criticising the American authorities.
I was mistaken, actually, guys, when I said the ticket prices are largely in the US. It looks like in Mexico and Canada, the group stage games, since they went on sale last month, have got more expensive by some with about 25% increase as well. So this is not just a US issue. The tournament obviously is in these 3 countries for that World Cup. Ziggs, you and Rob went to the UEFA thing. You've seen these. They've been talking about accessible ticket prices, but the very high premium pricing is going to be extremely high. UEFA makes so much money from football. So does FIFA without doing any of these things. Is there a reason why ticket prices, and they're not for profit organizations, the TV rights are going to be enormous. The competition is going to be brilliant. The point of these really, really expensive tickets, is it just because they can and there are some people who can afford it? Is that the logic?
Wouldn't they argue it's to invest back into football?
Is that yeah, that's what we talked about before, but we've seen it. Maybe, it's a really good point, Rob. Perhaps we should see more examples of how this is all reinvested in football. And maybe it's our fault in the media for not seeing these wonderful grassroots projects these organizations are doing.
And it's the deals that they have to do with the players' unions to pay the players to be at the tournaments as well.
They've been doing them quite
and the
well,
prize
haven't
money
they?
for the federations.
And they're paying them too. And they're taking huge profits out of these events. And they're also tax-free status wherever they go. Don't forget, where they go to these countries, whether it's
I think that the issue here is that the people who run large football organisations think that the people who elect them need rewarding by having more money in whatever it is, development money or just the allocation to national associations. And so that's why they want more money to pass on to their electorate. It's a sort of...
As for the Euros launch itself, we got the logo. Problematic when it's 4 countries part of the hosting: England, Scotland, Wales, and Ireland. You can't really use any emblems because there isn't one that's specific to all of them, and you can't have an overcrowded logo. So as we've seen with the logo for the 2026 World Cup in Canada, Mexico, and the United States, it's the trophy that dominates with just the words Euro 28 in colours. And interestingly, they're going with Euro 28, not 2028. We're so far into the century now that we scrapped the 20.
Rob, first time we've had 2 digits since
Euro 96.
Uh-huh.
back in the UK. That one only in England. So this logo has the colours of looks like red, dark blue, light blue, and green for Ireland. So a nod to each of the 4 hosting nations.
Northern Ireland should have hosted games at Casement Park. They couldn't get the funding through, so instead the draw for the tournament will be in Belfast.
Yeah, the qualified draw in December next year. Interestingly, there was still a lot of chat around about the FIFA Peace Prize announcement, wasn't there?
I think we all separately went and made the same gag to people. Did they take a Peace Prize into Downing Street for Keir Starmer?
Exactly.
What were you hearing, Zeke? What was the chatter around the Peace Prize?
Oh, just people just thinking it's sort of, a lot of eye rolling and a lot of
Guffaws.
guffaws, and people. Is there any chance of anybody apart from Donald Trump winning this? Somebody did tell me quite an interesting story, which sort of illustrates about why, if you become FIFA president, it takes over your whole, sort of changes your being, and because you start thinking you're incredibly important.
Rather than just talking about FIFA.
Exactly. You were there, Rob, when somebody was telling about this story about Sepp Blatter in around 2008. And it was his birthday, and in his office in Zurich, and the phone rings, his mobile phone rings, and he sees, and the other people who are in the room also see, it's Vladimir Putin on the line, and he starts saying the first line in English, "Happy birthday to you."
Because I did actually ask, was it in English? Because we don't hear Vladimir Putin in English. So that's why, first of all, we told he was singing Happy Birthday. I was like, oh, in English. And yes, but there's more to come, because while he was on the phone to Vladimir Putin, apparently another call came in.
Yes, on call waiting, because the Pope was ringing to wish happy birthday to Sepp Blatter.
So let's just have a look, because there's been a few popes.
Pope Benedict.
Pope Benedict, who replaced Blatter's famously a Catholic as well, and he was close to the previous Pope, wasn't he, John Paul II, because they were both goalkeepers. I think he's used that term in press conferences that we've attended in the past. So the situation, if I wasn't there with you guys, so Blatter's got his mobile. Vladimir Putin is singing with gusto in his best English, happy birthday, and then the phone lights up with a second call coming in. Does he have to stop? So they said, listen, Vlad, I'm going to have to put you on hold. As much as I'm enjoying this, I've got a more important phone call. Is that what happens, Zig? Is that what your friend was telling you?
Exactly that. I don't know what happened, whether he did put Mr. Putin on hold or what. Maybe he just said to the Pope, "I'll call you back in 2 minutes." Anyway, it just showed to me, and it just shows actually that if you're, obviously Putin wanted something from Blatter, didn't he? Because he was, within a couple of years, he was bidding for Russia to host the World Cup. But it does shows actually, if you're Sepp Blatter and you've got Putin and the Pope ringing to wish you happy birthday, then you must think, my God, I really am important.
Yeah, exactly. And then when we're wondering from outside, why do these people behave the way they do? Oh, wow, he's changed a bit. He never used to be like this. And I guess that seat and all that all those people treating you differently might get to your head. And we've seen people, whether it's in sports or other areas of life, change a little bit when you get all this deference, gilded carpets, red carpets, people meeting you at the plane, presidents, royalty. It may change you.
So now we know the first question when we get that full press conference. If you had anyone interesting singing happy birthday down the line to you, giving you a call.
It'll be a video call nowadays, wouldn't it? From those days. There'll be a FaceTime hangout with MBS, maybe, or something like that. Guys, only saying that because we've broken a record if we didn't. We didn't mention Saudi Arabia today.
Apparently, Mohammed bin Salman is due at the White House very soon as well to see Donald Trump.
Guess who else is likely to be there?
If you want to send your suggestions in, sportunlockpod@gmail.com, @sportunlocked on all the social platforms. For now, thank you for listening. Goodbye.